I looked out the window and saw freshly fallen snow. All the houses along the street were decorated for the new year. Santa Claus and reindeer on the roofs, Christmas scenes in the front yards, garlands on the Christmas trees outside and inside, shining through the windows. The spirit of the holiday was everywhere, but not in my house. I turned away from the window and looked around. The tree lay on the floor, covered in shards of glass from broken light bulbs and broken Christmas decorations. I probably should have seen this coming. Candy has always had a short temper, and she didn't like her Christmas present. She didn't like it at all. But what do they always say? It's not the gift that's important, but the attention. I took one last look at the mess and decided that cleaning could wait until morning, and then I went to bed. Candy and I were married for 5 relatively prosperous years. I was her second husband, and she was my third. We both worked as middle managers, and 2 salaries, as well as the absence of children, allowed us to lead a pretty decent lifestyle. Candy and I were party animals, and on the weekends you could bet we'd be at a party, throwing a party, or going to town drinking and dancing. Candy was a beautiful and sexy woman, and she attracted a lot of male attention in a quiet environment and dressed conservatively. At parties where alcohol flowed freely, loud music was played, and there were no restrictions, she was dressed to attract attention that bordered on shocking. She was constantly pestered, and the men spent a lot of time trying to separate Candy from the crowd and take her to a place where they could try their luck in privacy. Candy waved them off good-naturedly, but that never stopped them from coming back and trying again. And I? Like most men who are lucky enough to have such a desirable woman, I had to learn to live with it. This is not difficult to do when you absolutely trust your partner. I would sit quietly, knowing that Candy belonged to me and that no matter how persistent the men were, she would brush them off. Candy had a best friend. Marlene and Candy had known each other since elementary school and were closer than most sisters. I didn't know Marlene very well, but I didn't like her. There was just something about her that didn't suit me. When I met Candy and we started dating, Marlene always seemed to be around, and I know it sounds stupid, but whenever Marlene was around, I felt a bad feeling. Luckily, in my opinion, Marlene got married about 6 months before Candy and I did, and Marlene's husband got a job in another state, and they moved. Marlene and Frank got married in a civil ceremony, and of course Candy had to be there, and I had no choice. I remember looking at Frank and wondering what it was that attracted a guy like him to Marlene. Although I barely knew them both, I would have bet 20 to 1 that their union would last long. Frank and Marlene flew here to be there when Candy and I got married, and I couldn't help but notice how haggard Frank looked. I wondered if it was his new job or his new wife. Marlene may have lived out of state, but that didn't mean she disappeared from Candy's life. They spoke on the phone 2 to 3 times a week, and sometimes their calls on weekends lasted more than 2 hours. One Sunday, after one of those 2-hour calls, Candy asked me if I would mind if she took a couple of days to visit Marlene. I have time ahead for communication, and not everything is smooth between her and Frank. She needs a little cheering up. Do you really think it's smart to go there and interfere in their problems? You can only make the situation worse. She is my oldest and dearest friend, but I do not close my eyes to her shortcomings. She can be a little hard to live with, and maybe my presence will take some of the pressure off Frank. I didn't think her leaving was a good idea, but I was smart enough to know that my attempts to talk Candy out of it would only ruin our marriage, so I simply said, "You know her better than I do, honey, and if you think a visit will help, then go." Candy was gone for 5 days, and when she returned, she seemed to be worried about something. I suggested that her visit had not gone as she expected, but I didn't bother asking, and after a couple of days, she was back to her old self. 6 months passed and Candy again asked if I would mind if she visited Marlene. I didn't want her to do it, but I didn't have a good reason to refuse, and I knew I wouldn't get away with it. I'd rather you didn't do that. All I would have achieved is that Candy would have asked me why, and the answer, because I don't like her, would have been unacceptable. Candy was gone for 4 days, and when she returned, she was a little out of sorts, just as she had been since her first visit. But just like last time, after a couple of days, she was fine. Over the next year, Candy took a 3-day weekend every 3 or 4 months to visit Marlene, and always came back close to death. But after a couple of days, all her bad mood would go away. And then one day Candy came up to me and said, "Baby, can I ask you a huge favor?" "I don't know why not. I never tell you no, do I? This time you can do it." "Why should I do this?" "I'm not blind, baby. You never said a word to me about it. But I know you don't like Marlene. I thought I hid it pretty well. Maybe from others, but I know you too well. I take it this huge favor has something to do with Marlene. She and Frank broke up, and she's coming back here. Can she live in the spare bedroom until she finds a job and a place of her own?" I didn't want to say no. I wanted to scream, "Hell no," but that would only make things worse for Candy and me. To save this peace, I had no choice but to agree. A week later, Marlene moved in with us, but within a week things started to change. Nothing special at first. It was just that Candy and Marlene spent a lot of time together in the kitchen, laughing and talking, which in itself meant nothing. But it always seemed to die down or stop when I walked into the room. Then Marlene and Candy started having a bachelorette party once a week. Then, every Saturday and Sunday, the two of them went looking for an apartment, which they could not seem to find. The only thing that took me weeks to notice was that, when returning from an evening walk or looking for an apartment, Candy remained a little distant from me, just as she returned from her visits to Marlene. It didn't last more than a day, but it happened, and I noticed it. One day, I was at work when my secretary told me that Frank McBride was asking for me on line 3. Frank was Marlene's husband, or rather her ex-husband, so I answered the call. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, he immediately got down to business. I suffered for a long time because of this. At first, I told myself it was none of my business and thought that maybe you already knew that you and Candy had one of those open marriages. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew I had to call you. I wouldn't want you to have AIDS. What are you trying to tell me, Frank? I'm not going to tell you anything. I'll just send you a package. You can watch it and make your own decision. The fact that Marlene is with you now means that I have accepted what I have. I sent the package this morning, so you will receive it the day after tomorrow. Take care and good luck," he said before hanging up. There was no way in hell I could have understood what Frank was trying to tell me. Of course, I wasn't dead in my mind, so it was obvious that what was in the package was as much about Candy as it was about Marlene, and it was just as obvious that Frank didn't think I would like what was in the package. His comment about open marriage and AIDS gave me a hint as to why he and Marlene broke up, but I trusted Candy implicitly. The next 2 days dragged on endlessly. On Thursday morning, a package arrived at my office. I told the secretary that I didn't want to be disturbed, closed the office door, and opened the package. The box contained a video cassette and an envelope made of thick paper measuring 30 x 35 centimeters. I opened the envelope to find 24 8 by 5-inch photographs and a copy of the Simpson Investigations report. The photographs were of Marlene, Candy, and 3 men. Apparently, they were made in a bar. The lighting was poor, but photographs showed 2 women and 3 men either dancing or sitting in a booth. The dancing photos of Candy showed a man's hand on her butt as she smiled at him, a man's hand on her right breast as she smiled at him, and 2 photos of a man's leg sandwiched between her legs and pressed against her crotch. Only one of the photos, taken in the booth, showed Candy clearly, and it showed a man with his arm around her as she smiled at him. Other photos showed Marlene kissing 3 men and being groped by them, and in several photos in a booth, a man's hand could be seen reaching under her dress and touching her breast as she smiled at him. The Simpson Investigations report stated that they picked up the subject Marlene and an unidentified companion Candy at the subject's residence at 7:45 p.m. The subject was followed to the Harris Bar and Grill, where the subject and her companion met with three as yet unidentified men. The report went on to say that the two women were seen in extremely friendly relationships with the three men. At 10:15 p.m., 12 women and three men left Harris, crossed the street, and headed to the Venus Motel, where they entered room 116, where they remained until 1:30 a.m. The subject and her companion were then transported to the subject's residence, where they arrived at Zo 205. Looks like my absolute trust in Candy was a little misplaced. I took the videotape and went down to the conference room where we had a TV and VCR. I locked the door behind me and watched the recording. It only showed Marlene and Candy walking from the bar with three men to room 116 and going inside at 8:15, leaving the room at 2:30. I had been married twice before, and both marriages ended when I caught my wife cheating, so I was already aware of how denial works and how much time you have to wait, hoping that things aren't really that bad and things will get better, and it hurts in the long run. I called my friend Roger, who was also my lawyer, and asked if he could give me a few minutes of his time. He said he could help me, and I immediately went to his office. He told me what I already understood. I had no proof, at least not from what I had. He repeated them point by point. The photographs themselves don't mean anything. We don't know what happened the moment before the photo was taken or the moment after it. The photo could have been taken at the very moment the man put his hand on Candy's butt, and the next moment she could have pushed that hand away or slapped the man. The same can be said about a photo in which a man's hand is on her chest or hugging her. We don't know what happened immediately before or after, and the investigators' report doesn't mention Candy or what she did. Their target was Marlene, and she was the one they focused on. The recording only proves that two women entered a motel room with three men. They didn't go from the bar to the office or rent a room, meaning one or more men were already staying there, so you couldn't demonstrate intent to commit adultery. Once in the room, we have no idea what they were doing. Perhaps they played cards or watched videos. What we think happened doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what you can prove in court, and you have no evidence. You have very good reason to believe that your wife is cheating on you. You have two options: face Candy and hope that she confesses everything, or hire your own investigator to make inquiries about her. That's what I did. I hired a private detective company and sent them on a hunt. They quickly established that during the bachelorette party, Candy and Marlene went to bars, picked up men, and took them to motels. Because the locations were different bars or motels, it was difficult for investigators to obtain reliable audio or video evidence. Do you have to travel as part of your work? The leading investigator asked me. Often. Could you go on a long trip, say 4 to 5 days, or simulate a business trip of the same duration? I could, but why? Both women live in your house. This is where they are most comfortable, and I would imagine that if you were going to be gone for a few days, they would take the men they pick up to your home rather than to a motel. It will be quite easy to connect your home to audio and video recording. That night at dinner, I told Candy that I had a business trip coming up next week. I'm leaving on Monday and won't be back until late Friday or maybe even Saturday, so you'll have a lot of work to do. What do you mean? I mean, from today until Monday morning, you have to give me enough love to last me a whole week. Candy smiled. I can do it. And she did it. She wore me down almost every evening until Monday came. She even sent Marlene out of the house to be home with me. On Monday morning, I kissed Candy goodbye, told her she could reach me on her cell phone if she needed me, and left the house pretending I was going on a trip. I drove across town, checked into a hotel, and then headed to work. Marlene found a job, so on Monday, after both women went to work, the detective agency entered the house and installed wiring there. On Tuesday morning, a detective called me and told me that two women left the house, picked up two men, and went to a motel. Tuesday night was a repeat of Monday night, except that the two women drove the three men they met to a motel. On Friday morning, they called me and said that they were ready to report. The women picked up 2 men and brought them home. On Thursday evening, there were 3 of them. The detective told me that I could stop by his office on Friday afternoon to pick up the report and tapes. I told them I'd be there in the afternoon and then called Candy at work and told them I'd be home that evening. That same day, I went to the Myron Investigations office to pick up the report and tapes. Have you looked at them? Yes, we have familiarized ourselves with the results of both records. Did we get what I need for a divorce? Hard to say. I don't understand. Did you have evidence of my wife's infidelity? Again, it's hard to say. You will have to review the recording and make your own decision. Come on. You either have her on tape having sex with another man or you don't. Well, I can make this clear. On neither of the 2 nights that we have on record did your wife have sex with another man. Are you saying that she's not cheating on me? Again, this should be your decision. You will need to review the recordings and form your own opinion on this matter. I paid the bill, then picked up the tapes and returned to my office. Everyone had left for the weekend, so I walked into the conference room, locked the door behind me, and sat down to watch the tape. The episode, filmed Wednesday night, began with Candy, Marlene, and 2 men entering Marlene's room. Marlene and the 2 men immediately took off their clothes, and Candy walked over to a chair, sat down, and watched. Marlene knelt down in front of one of the men and began to please him. Another man approached Candy and said, "Come on, honey, take off your clothes and let's have some fun." "Sorry, but I told you before we left the bar that I'm not cheating on my husband. You knew before we came here that it would just be you 2 and Marlene. What's the matter? Do you enjoy watching? Doesn't matter. The only thing you need to know is that you won't have any luck with me." The recording was 3 hours long, and I quickly replayed most of it. Throughout this time, Candy sat in the chair and watched as Marlene took both men. I didn't like Marlene, but I couldn't deny that she had a great body and she looked sexy as hell. Just listening to her was as erotic as watching. When it was all over, they got up, got dressed, and Marlene walked them out. The next fragment of the recording showed Candy entering our bedroom, undressing and lying down on the bed. 2 minutes later, a naked Marlene came into the room and got into bed with Candy. "I saw you, girlfriend. I saw you put your hand under your skirt. When will you finally stop this? You want to? Otherwise, she wouldn't have been stroking herself while watching me. You're missing out on great sex." How many times do I have to tell you, Mar? Hal has 2 ex-wives who became exes because they cheated on him. I love him and don't want to be his ex-wife. Therefore, I don't cheat. Well, all I can say is that you're missing out on a damn good time. Come on, baby, get busy with me. My jaw almost hit the floor when Candy started pleasuring her friend and brought her to the finish line. After Marlene calmed down, she said, "Oh God, baby, that was fucking great. You do it better than anyone else." Candy stretched, turned off the light, and the 2 women huddled close to each other. A few minutes later, I heard the even breathing of sleeping people. I wanted a drink and my boss had a bar in his office, so I went down there, got myself 2 black jacks and an ice cube, went back to the conference room and turned on the record. 2 women and 3 men entered the room, and one of the men said, "Why don't we take the opposite room? There's a bigger bed there. This is my husband's bed, so we won't use it." "Why the hell not? He's not here, and he'll never know." "No, he wouldn't know," said Candy, but I wouldn't agree. "The bed here is big enough." This time, one of the men had a huge manhood, and Marlene tried to convince Candy to deviate from her rules and have sex. However, all Candy allowed herself to do was satisfy him with her hands. After the men left, Marlene said, "What happened, girlfriend? I thought you were going to do this tonight. I thought Lex was really annoying you. He almost achieved his goal. You'll never know how close I came to this. You had to make up your mind, baby. You missed a great moment. I've never been so full and so horny at the same time. You may never have a chance at something like this again. From my point of view, this is good. I won't deceive Hal. I love this man and will not allow myself to lose him. This makes no sense. Candy, Hal will never know. But I got married and won't be able to look into his eyes. Well, this is your life. And she lay on her back and said, please me, baby. And Candy did the same thing she did last night. I turned off the TV and sat staring at the wall. Now I understood what the detective meant when he said that I would have to decide for myself whether she cheated on me. Is it so? Technically, yes, she cheated. Handjob was still a sexual act with a man who was not her husband, and what she did with Marlene on both nights was sexual interaction with another person, even though it was not a man. God, I didn't know whether to be angry or not. Candy made it clear both times that no one was going to get into her panties, and she told Marlene that she loved me too much to cheat on me and risk losing me. But what the hell was wrong with her going to the bar with Marlene, hoping for something, and then going to watch? What bothered me the most was how she pleased Marlene when Marlene's lovers left. This bothered me. It was very disturbing. Candy ran out to greet me as I walked through the front door. She hugged me, kissed me, and told me how much she missed me. I hope you had dinner on the plane, love, because I didn't cook for you today. I planned to drag you straight into the bedroom. If you're lucky, I might end up with enough strength to get out of bed in the morning so you can have breakfast. I don't think so, Candy. We need to talk. Is Marlene here? No, she left. Fine. I would prefer that she not be present. What's the matter, Hal? What's happened? I went into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and motioned for Candy to sit across from me. Frank called me the other day, and although he did not talk about why he and Marlene broke up, he said that he would send me a package in which he would explain everything. Candy's face turned pale when she heard this. I opened my briefcase, took out the photographs, videotape, and report he had sent me, and slid them across the table to Candy. Suppose you read this, look at the pictures, and then tell me why I shouldn't treat you the same as the last two cheating whores I was married to. While you read, I'm going to unpack and take a shower. I left her sitting at the table, staring at the photographs and the report. 20 minutes passed before I went down to the kitchen. Candy was crying, and when I entered the room, she did not look up at me. After a minute or two of silence, I said, well, what can you say in your defense? Looks like you've already made up your mind. Hal, does it really matter what I say? No, if it doesn't matter to you. What does it mean? It just means that if you're willing to accept what I think, then so be it. It's not what you think, Hal. Come on, Candy, how can it not be what I think it is? Two girls go to a bar together, meet three guys, go with them to a motel room where they stay for 3 hours. So, am I supposed to believe that you played Monopoly? No, but I didn't do anything with any of these men. What? Are you saying you just sat there and watched Marlene have sex with the three of them? Yes, Hal, that's all I did. And I am supposed to believe this. You probably won't believe it, but it's true. So what? Are you a voyeur? No, I'm more of a bodyguard. You'll have to explain this to me. Marlene is a nymphomaniac. I know doctors say there is no such thing, but they don't know Marlene. Marlene loves multiple partners and has had some uncomfortable moments when she has been alone with multiple guys. I support her to keep her safe. I can't imagine that 2 or 3 guys wouldn't be able to run over you, tie you up, and then do whatever they want to Marlene, and to you too, for that matter. I have a 380 llama that you bought me when there were a series of robberies in our neighborhood. Do you walk around with a gun in your purse? Only on those evenings when I go out with Marlene. How the hell did you take it with you when you flew to her? I didn't have to take it with me. Marlene had her own pistol, a small .32 automatic. I used it when I visited her. The .32 caliber won't stop anyone. It makes them stop and think when it's aimed at their crotch. Did you do this? Twice. And you expect me to believe this? Whether you believe it or not. Hal, it's true. Is this why you visited Marlene? Mostly. And this is how you girls spend your evenings now that she's back here? Yes. And you claim that you never did anything during these little walks? I've been touched a few times, but I've never had sex with another man. Never had sex? No. Well, I think it happened once. What was it? Once there was manual work with one guy. Why? I really do not know. It was probably because his instrument was so huge. And that's all. No other sexual activity in the evenings. No, Hal, that was the only time. What are you going to do? I'm trying to force myself to believe you. I'll try and see if I can handle it. But my attempts come at a cost. What? I want you to break off your relationship with Marlene. I want her out of this house by Sunday, and I don't want you to deal with her anymore. Come on, Hal. She was my best friend for over 25 years. I can't turn my back on her. Candy of your choice. The point is, if she stays in your life, I'll leave. What if she leaves and I stay? I'll only stay as long as you stay away from her. And one more thing. I'm not stupid, so I'm going to get tested for STDs as soon as I can get an appointment. And I want you to do the same. We will only have sex with condoms until we both receive a health certificate. This means at least 6 months, because that's how long it takes for AIDS to show up. Hal, I swear to you, I haven't had sex with another man since I met you. I've always believed in better safety than sorry. Candy, your story is so unusual that I'm willing to believe it might be true. But like I said, I'm not a fool and I'm not going to take any chances. These are my terms. Candy, you either accept them or you don't. I got up from the table and left her standing, staring at my back. Marlene found an apartment on Saturday, and by Sunday evening, she had moved into it. Candy apparently explained my request to Marlene, and a lot of tears were shed because of it. And Candy was simply unbearable for a couple of weeks. 4 months passed, and as far as I could tell, Candy had never met Marlene for lunch or coffee. They talked a lot on the phone, but I didn't care. All I demanded was that Candy and Marlene never go anywhere together or be alone. Candy didn't like the feel of condoms, so our sex life slowed down a bit, but otherwise our relationship seemed to be as strong as it had been before I received Frank's package. Then a week came when the company sent me out of town on business for 3 days. I told Candy about this and then called the detective agency I had contacted earlier. It was 2 days before Christmas, and after dinner I gave Candy a gift-wrapped box. What is this? An early Christmas present. She unwrapped the wrapping paper to reveal a cardboard box. Inside were 3 envelopes measuring 25 x 35 centimeters and a video cassette. The envelopes had the letters A, B, and C on them. What is this? Start with the letter A and then watch the video. When you finish watching the video, read B and then open C. I'll be upstairs. I left Candy sitting there and went up to our bedroom. A is a detective's report from my last fake mission. B, this envelope contained a detective's report from a business trip I had just taken, and the video, of course, was from Candy's adventures. Envelope B contained divorce papers. I was packing my bag when Candy burst into the room. You bastard! How could you do this to me? I suggested that you choose Candy, me or Marlene, and you chose Marlene. So what? You already knew I was telling you the truth when we had that stupid meeting in the kitchen. I told you I just sat and watched. For God's sake, Hal, you saw it on video. Yes, Candy, but that wasn't all I saw on the tape, was it? I saw you and the guy with the huge tool, and I saw how close you were to giving in to him. I saw you go crazy thinking about that huge instrument after you left the room, and I knew that if you kept running around with Marlene, the day would come when you would slip up. What else did I see, Candy? I saw Marlene have unprotected sex with 5 different men, and then I saw you please her. You don't have to have sex to get an STD. No matter how hard this little slut had sex, She could have gotten sick before this video was even filmed. Every time you pleased her, you risked getting something and bringing it home to me. That's why condoms and tests were needed, to make sure you weren't already infected with something and didn't pass it on to me. That was another reason I wanted you to stay away from Marlene, so you wouldn't catch something if it turned out you were clean. I gave you a chance, Candy. All you had to do was stay away from Marlene, but you didn't. I left you alone for 3 nights, Candy, and what did you do? You went to a bar with Marlene and then to a motel for all 3 nights. You made your choice, Candy, and it wasn't me. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to finish packing. Are you going to leave? Are you really going to leave me? Yes. She ran out of the room, and a few minutes later I heard a loud crash and the sound of breaking glass. The door slammed. I heard the garage door opener go off, and then there was silence as I continued to pack my things.